We are finally in Nod-Krai. This place looks amazing everywhere you look, the music is incredible, and the lore is absurd. In this sublunary video, we will mainly focus on Columbina's birth and existence starting from the very beginning of everything, but first. This is a theory video and leaks are prohibited in the comments section. I will use information available in the game, but my theories and conclusions are not to be considered the official lore of the game, unless I got something right and it's confirmed in a later update of the game itself. Well then, warm up your moonlit antlers and let's get this video started. The story of the Moon Maiden is technically not that complicated, but her birth was a result of a very ancient project that was secretly conducted for millennia, so there's a lot of lore that needs to be taken into account to figure everything out, and we still have just a quote-unquote small part of it, since we're still at the very beginning of this whole new version of the game. As before, to fully understand the story, we need to start from the very beginning, so when the moons were created. But since I already have 2 videos talking about this in detail, I'll just talk about the new info we got and leave you with the links to those videos in the description. As I correctly deduced, there have been multiple sets of moons in Teyvat. The first 3 real moons had been created by the now nameless primordial being that once ruled over all. Each moon was ruled by a moon goddess and they served Nibelung, but in the funerary year or the war of funerary flame, so when the second who came fought against the primordial one, the moon goddesses died, 2 moons were destroyed and the third one remained intact but was later hidden behind the fake sky. Nibelung then reconstructed the moons, as Kukulkan and Xuquatl were talking about in the past. These fake moons are basically mechanical constructs that should have guarded Teyvat while Nibelung left the human realm to obtain the Abyss to replace the authorities of the dragon sovereigns that had been usurped. But his absence allowed the Heavenly Principles to descend into Teyvat, completely replacing the primordial creator, taking over the world and the moons. So when Nibelung came back completely corrupted by the Abyss, he saw what happened and fought the Heavenly Principles in the War of Vengeance. Now, Kukulkan said Nibelung's name in version 5.5, while the Heavenly Principles are called Pitkamonen by the people of Nod-Krai, because saying their name out loud is forbidden, even Yoholtekutin doesn't dare, which means that the Heavenly Principles do have a name. If Nibelung created the fake moons, and the Heavenly Principles then took over these moons, then who is the now nameless being that created the real moons? I'll let you decide this time. Let's get acquainted with the real moons of Teyvat. The first to have been created was the Eternal Moon, the largest of the 3 and with the highest concentration of Kuuvahki, ruled by the goddess Arya, and its purpose was to govern the ocean tides. Then came the Frost Moon, smaller than her sister but extremely brighter, reason why it became a lantern in the night. I believe the moon goddess was Sunnet, but we'll understand why in a second. Lastly came the Iridescent Moon, the smallest and dimmest of the 3. It was barely visible and no one really knew what her purpose was, and as a consequence the moon goddess had to be canon. As we said before, all 3 goddesses died during the funerary year. The Eternal Moon was shattered just like the Iridescent Moon, of which the Crimson Shadows sank into the Abyssal Sea, so it probably became the Crimson Moon of Karya, while the Frost Moon remains as an empty husk, hidden behind the fake sky, retaining a sliver of her will which Skirk felt when she came to Teyvat. By now, you might have remembered about the names on the origami letter Alice received in the teaser: Aralos, Solnari, and Kanon. Those are most likely the names of the moons Nibelung reconstructed, which are basically AI constructs similar to the Dragon Lords, as we saw in the World Quest Echoes of an Unfinished Past, when the remnants of the moon recognized the traveler as Xuquatl, probably because we acquired part of his authority when we awakened Pyro. The reason why I believe Sanet is the Frost Moon goddess lies in the fact that Rerir is called Rerir of Solnari, and back in Bedtime Story we were shown the moon when Dainsleif said his name, so the fake moon in the sky, what has been believed to be the Frost Moon, should be Solnari, hence the real one should be Sanet. Now, about the fake moons or dragon moons, according to the hymns of the far north, Takoya Yanikuinen, the primeval blacksmith, Nibelung, reconstructed the 3 moons in the same order as the real ones were created. The first moon was defined as the golden bow with lunar gleam, a weapon meant to strike down Nibelung's enemies. The second was the great chariot meant to guard his home with its moonlit glimmer. And the third one was the Shadow of Moonlight, created because apparently Nibelung might have fallen in love with the Daughter of the Stars. The first 2 moons were then stolen and are now used by Nibelung's enemy, while the light of the third was quenched when Nibelung wandered into the abyss. Now, we can actually play a little game here. Since the 3 moons were named after literary and musical terms, what do you think Columbina's real name is gonna be? My bet is on ballad, mainly because we would then have 2 literary terms and 2 music terms in total. Let me know your ideas in the comments. Since we mentioned the hymns of the far north, it's time to move to a more complicated and actually twisted section of the story, Hyperborea. This civilization existed in the era of the angels and they served the first angel, Koitar, directly. They used to pray to the shades and as always, since they couldn't use their real names, they came up with new ones. Mad Teraka, the mother of life, is Naberius. Tuonetar, the lady of the underworld, is Ronova. Laimalea, the mother of time, is Esroth, and the 5th song is missing, so we don't know how they address Asmodee. Thank you, devs, thank you. They also praised, but at the same time kinda insulted Nibelung, Takoya Yanikuinen, but very interestingly, when it comes to the Heavenly Principles, Pitkamunen, the Lord of the 7 Calamities, they basically just asked it to go away from the moral realm and leave them alone, because this winged being of unknowable gender was just an extremely vengeful deity. Now, Hyperborea is where the Voyager sent her mind to when she came back to check on Nibelung, only to see that he was dead and everything had completely changed. She possessed the mind of a young man, Soitervoinen, and that allowed her, now him, to meet Koitar, whom he asked about the true history of Tvat, the one thing no one should have ever known, but when he told her about his true identity, she just told him everything. In an attempt to rebel against the Heavenly Principles, Koitar gifted her people the authority of creation, with which they were supposed to create a being that could merge with the world itself. This is how the Fae were created, but also a very important project that lasted for millennia. The Seed of Life project, aka the Sacred Heir project, which would have eventually caused the birth of the Moon Maiden. Koitar also dreamt about building a tower that would have led the people to the heavens, and together with the Apostle of Hyperborea, the Voyager again, they began construction, but this is when things went south. I suppose this is when the mortals tried to breach the Garden of the Gods, as described by the 4 tiaras from version 1.0, and of course the Heavenly Principles didn't like that, so out of fear that these delusions could have posed a threat to their order, they sent down the Celestial Nails, one of which hit Hyperborea straight on, destroying it in one single night. The sole survivors were those who weren't in the city at the moment, and legend says that the goddess of the Frost Moon guided them to the place they eventually settled down in, Nod-Krai, and because of her help, the people took on a new name, the Frost Moon Science. I don't think I need to highlight the fact that the authority of creation was Naberius' heart, which remained buried in the ruins of Hyperborea until recently, when Reindaughter found it. But without it, their sacred project also couldn't have been continued anymore, at least not the way they used to. So did the Frost Moon Science decide to rely on primitive means to achieve their goals: laws. They came up with an incredibly long list of laws to prevent their bloodline from going extinct and to preserve its purity, and generally speaking, most of these laws were not that outrageous, they were basically common sense, but some others were very twisted. Essentially, the archpriestesses would have picked people with the purest blood and persuaded them into a relationship so that they would produce children, but at the very least no one has ever been coerced into doing anything they didn't want. It had to be voluntary, and if they refused, they just tried with another chosen pair. Just like the authority of creation, other essential technikos and mechanikos, basically processes and devices, were lost in the fall of Hyperborea, so some devices couldn't function anymore, specifically 2 devices that the Voyager created. The Arrow of Terpikenauras, a weapon capable of condensing and shooting Kuuvahki energy to dispel designated areas of Void Realm energy, but luckily this device could have been reconstructed, and as you might have guessed, this was the original version of Aino's Boom and Blast Kuuvahki Cannon, and the Subatomic Assembling Mass Energy Patterning Orb, aka the Sampo Mill. A device that works like both a Philosopher's Stone and a cornucopia, capable of producing everything they needed. The Sampo Mill couldn't be operated anymore because the component needed to activate it was buried in Hyperborea, and although one of the scientists figured out that the Void Realm energy could have bypassed this problem and jump-started it, it was deemed too risky, so it was stored in a secret chamber to prevent it from being tainted. As the name implies, this device was an orb that could use Kuuvahki, so I'm fairly certain it's the Moon Marrow. To figure out what happened next, we need to talk about 5 different people whose stories eventually converge into what I'm calling the Frost Moon soap opera. Before the Archon War and during the Crimson Moon Dynasty, the people of Caria realized that, due to the unique location of their nation, strange phenomena kept appearing in their star charts. These phenomena were then defined as signs of truth because they realized that the sky was fake and that they were seeing what was beyond it. They were seeing the truth. After the Archon War though, with the fall of the Crimson Moon Dynasty and the rise of the Eclipse Dynasty, researching these signs of truth became forbidden. Only few selected people could do it, but only because it would have helped their king. If this king was Ermen, then I'll just ignore the possibility that time flows differently in Caria because of its proximity to the Abyss, at least for now. Anyway, a young man called Rotwang turned his back to the gods, left his unspecified nation and took refuge in Caria, where he joined the Universitas Magistrorum and became a novice monk. As he was cleaning one of the rooms, he removed the dust that covered the Apausha's mirror, and if you forgot about it, the sign of Apausha, a sign of truth, is the hole in the sky of the Girl of the Sands. Through this sign, Rotwang was able to glimpse at a pitch-black Elysium beyond the fake sky, but this view also corrupted his mind, so he began praising the abyss beyond the heavens. For this transgression, he was expelled from the Universitas Magistrorum and exiled from Caria, and this is where things get interesting. Apparently, for those who renounced the gods and went to Caria, leaving the nation was a punishment worse than death, because as soon as they stepped under the real sun on the surface, they were instantly turned into hilichurls. This of course happened to the people who were exiled along with Rotwang, but nothing happened to him, most likely because he absorbed so much abyss energy from the Apausha's mirror that the sun was not very effective. As a consequence, Rotwang believed that he was the chosen one, and that if flames can both illuminate and destroy the world, his fate was to become the moth that leapt into the flame. I present to you the first flame chaser of Teyvat. We all knew it was gonna happen sooner or later. By the way, I don't think this was the result of a curse. These people most likely got slowly and unknowingly corrupted by the Abyss, and as long as they stayed in Caria, something prevented them from losing control, which halted their transformation. Anyway, Rotwang then traveled the world, read everything he could find, and even became a well-known professor in Snezhnaya, who mingled with the Fey nobles in the rotating galleries of the Zapolyarny Palace, where he was also given the nickname Mad Monk. But he never found anything about his beloved pitch-dark Elysium anywhere. The only place he hadn't gone to was Nod-Krai, because it was an apparently barren, uninhabited stretch of land where he wouldn't have expected to find a thing. Despite that, the Belgi Tsar sent Rotwang, now known as Rotwang, as his envoy to Nod-Krai with a secret mission, because the Tsar knew about the secret power buried in that land that would have allowed him to rule the entirety of Teyvat. A twisted scheme that the Heavenly Principles obviously would have never appreciated. Rotwang was kinda disappointed because he knew what truly mattered existed beyond Teyvat, but in Nod-Krai he finally found the path that led to this Elysium. He just needed to find the key to open its gates. Let's put Rotwang's story on pause to introduce the other characters. Years before the Cataclysm, the Secret Heir project finally produced the Holy Lady destined to give birth to the Moon Maiden. But one thing led to another and this woman turned her back to her fate. She fled with a Snezhnayan man and gave birth to a child that, although he wasn't the Secret Heir they were looking for, he was the one destined to be the King of Elysium. This child was Reed Miller, who then befriended another young boy, Solovey, with which he dreamed of a paradise on Earth where people were free to do as they pleased. As they grew up, Solovey joined the nobility of Snezhnaya as the Tsar's most faithful spy, where Reed became a young officer. Around this time, Rotwang arrived in Nod-Krai where he met and befriended Lovia, the archpriestess of the Frostmoon Science, and they started working together. Years later, Hisi Island saw the birth of two twins, Ayla and Alia, who both displayed majestic antlers and silver blood, a sign of their perfectly pure Hyperborean bloodline just like their grandmother Lovia. You see, according to legends, in Hyperborea there was an Irminsul tree from which the people picked white branches to make crowns, again the 4 tiaras from version 1.0. When Hyperborea was destroyed, so was the Irminsul tree, and the people begged the moon goddess for new coronals, and right before she was obliterated, the goddess gifted them antlers of flawless moonlight they would then be born with. Because of the fall of their golden realm, their civilization was on the verge of extinction, so they created those laws from before to preserve and reconstruct their bloodlines, but only rare and special people with the purest blood displayed those majestic features, and they were the ones that needed to be, let's say, cultivated to eventually produce the Moon Maiden. Of the two twins, Alia was the chosen one, but once again, she also turned her back to her fate and fled with a young officer from Snezhnaya, Reed Miller, who also stole the sample mill, even though as the future King of Elysium, it would have been his anyway. To make it even clearer that she wanted to be left alone, she even cut her antlers, an act of supreme blasphemy. So Lovia secretly sent Rotwang to bring her back, but she ultimately decided to, let's say, go back to the ley lines of her own accord. Lovia just lost her ticket to witness the birth of the Moon Maiden, most likely for the second time actually, so she had to resort to plan B and go to the backup twins from a lesser bloodline, which means that twins were probably necessary to give birth to the Moon Maiden. The problem was that it would have taken centuries for a new chosen one to appear, way beyond Lovia's lifespan, so she came up with a sinister and utterly blasphemous scheme to speed things up, most likely with Rotwang's help. It seems that she wanted to use sins to wash away sins, but all things considered, it seems she just chose to use the Abyss, since these two also tried to use it to jumpstart the sample mill in the past. Lovia then manipulated Ayla to commit heinous crimes against those who could have impeded her plan, and Ayla just did everything she was asked for. Because who was she to deny the requests of the archpriestess chosen by the moon goddess herself, as her antlers and silver blood showed? Ayla, though, wasn't as unfeeling and robotic as Lovia expected. She did accept that her fate was that of a sinner, but only because those sins were necessary for the birth of the moon goddess. And she even secretly befriended Solovey, who warned her about a few of Lovia's red flags. When Lovia told Ayla that Solovey was a treacherous murderer who committed many wicked deeds and that he needed to be dealt with, Renova, the lady of the underworld, for whatever reason decided to intervene and told Ayla to get rid of Lovia, and so she did, in the sanctum of the Oathbearer, right where Solovey was supposed to die, and with the Moon's Weaver's Dawn, the sword that the Apostle of Hyperborea forged with pure moonlight. This is also when Ayla confirmed Solovey's suspicions. Lovia's antlers had been forged with pure iron and her blood was crimson like a normal person. She was not a chosen one. Soon after, Ayla and Solovey discovered Lovia and Rotwang's secret correspondence, so Solovey left to uncover Rotwang's true intentions, while Ayla sealed the sanctum, the last step toward the birth of a god. Right after, the Cataclysm happened and the Wild Hunt destroyed everything the pioneers had built. The only one who came to help from Snezhnaya was Solovey, who, together with a group of volunteers, fought against the Abyss, and then asked Ayla to go north to the Pillar of Embla, where she finally put an end to the abyssal catastrophe. By this point, Rotwang had tried to manipulate Reed Miller to leave Teyvat with them, since Rotwang believed to be the Chosen One, and Reed was actually the Chosen One destined to be the King of Elysium. And while Reed was eventually sentenced to death for his crimes as the greatest thief of all time, Rotwang couldn't break free from the fake sky and died because of it. Now, here's the thing. Ayla told Solovey that she foresaw Rotwang coming back to life from the Abyss, reason why she gifted Solovey, the first Torchbearer, the arrow of Terpichenauras, so that his successors, the Lightkeepers, would have used it to stop Rotwang in the future. This leads me to believe that Rotwang is none other than Rerir, who did indeed come back to life through the Abyss, who is obsessed with something beyond the fake sky and couldn't care less about the human realm, who knew how to use the Abyss to bypass Kuuvahki, who really wanted the Moon Marrow, which is most likely the sample mill, and who will be ultimately defeated by the hero of Elysium, that in this sublunary sphere is the Traveler. By the way, when Rerir came back to life, he mentioned a name we've never heard before, Tholindis, along with Vediflunir and Reindaughter. We don't know who this is, but we can at least take a guess. Rerir's blasphemy was against death, so Tholindis might be the Khaenri'ah name for Renova. It could also be Asmodee's name, since he wanted to break free from Teyvat. We also know that he died by falling into the moon's reflection, from which there is no return, so this name might be related to the moon, the Solnari he's obsessed with. Who knows, it might even be Columbina's real name, or maybe it's Dainslev's real name. Of course, this could be a completely new character we've never heard about, but I highly doubt it. What I do know is that there's a leak out there about Tholindis' true identity that I miraculously managed to avoid, so please, no leaks in the comment section. We can finally talk about the birth of the Moon Maiden, Kuutar, which happened a few years later, since Ayla was still alive. We don't really know who gave birth to her, but the fact that she's quote-unquote defective might be the result of Lovia's schemes against those two backup twins from the lesser bloodline from before. But the most important thing is that Columbina was born, as far as we know for now, from humans. She's a goddess born from the world, which might be what they meant when they said that she would have merged with the earth. Ayla, as we know, witnessed her birth, although she didn't really want to because she considered herself too much of a sinner to witness the birth of a god, and she used the Moonweaver's Dawn to offer Kuutar the first drop of silver blood. The Frostmoon Science revered Kutar beyond comprehension, but Ayla wished for her to be treated fairly and be given the right to choose for herself. Of course, her fears came to pass. The Science used Kutar as a portable miracle dispenser. They asked her for everything they could think of, even weapons, and Kutar, who believed that that was what she was supposed to do, gave them everything until she ran out of juice. So, feeling useless, she just left and was found by the Tsaritsa, who offered her a new home. There, she kinda became friends with Sandrone, Arlecchino, and above all Signora, who was actually a good person at heart. Well, with some major exceptions, I guess. But at the end of the day, the Tsaritsa also drained her of every single drop of power she had left. Columbina did fulfill her promise to the Tsaritsa. She gave her the power of a moon goddess she will eventually use with the Experimental Bureau, the weapon that will play a key role in her plan. But when the Fatui brought down the remnants of the Eternal Moon, she left the Fatui and went back to Hisi Island to regain her strength. Lauma asked her not to come out of the Silver Moon Hall to prevent the people from using her again, at least until she had told them about the truth of the moons and the fake sky. But something's wrong with Columbina. She can't replenish her powers and her time is running out. To conclude the video, there are a few details that are worth mentioning. When we met Sandrone for the first time, she said that we had already been an obstacle to her when she tried to retrieve a robot in the past. She was talking about Inefa, but we also caused her problems when she tried to steal Curve in Fontaine. And I'm beyond certain that Charred Lombro, the robot that the treasure hoarder stole from Sandrone's workshop, is Curve. Sandrone also said that we have a limited processing capability to calculate our options, and way later in the Archon quest she said that she didn't have a tremble function, which clearly means that she is a puppet, which was honestly very clear from the beginning. Out of curiosity, her automaton's name, Pulonia, in the Commedia dell'arte is actually Sandrone's wife, and although he's the main character of his story, she's the one who rules the family. We just need another little robot that needs to be called Sgorgigolo, Sandrone and Pulonia's son in the Commedia dell'arte, and the family would be complete, although that role might have already been given to Seymour actually. If you want my thoughts about Sandrone though, she is quite literally Furina from the beginning of version 4.0, when she kept repeating that she was the Archon and that she was the most powerful god of Ultivat, while it was clear, as I did say in my 4.0 analysis video, that she was convincing herself and her people of what she was saying, but the truth was the exact opposite. Sandrone is acting just the same, and that's probably because she's not as powerful as she says, and she's not even the real Harbinger. Pulonia is. Moving on, the Traveler was obviously capable of storing the moon marrow within his body without a problem, but what's more interesting is that Columbina associated the moon marrow, Arya's energy core that was automatically created upon her death, to a Gnosis. And since Columbina is the walking energy core of the Frost Moon Goddess, she deduced that the Traveler had become a Moon Goddess too. This could open up a discussion about how the Gnosis and the Dragon's authorities may be related, but this is not the right video to talk about it. Also, something we'll talk about in detail in another video is the spaceship. Now, apart from the fact that I love the design and I will try to make one in No Man's Sky, Either said that they landed safely in Nod-Krai, but landing on the wall of a mountain doesn't really sound that safe, to be honest, but above all, Lumine never got out of the ship, but she still came back to it during the Cataclysm. It is really starting to sound like the Lumine we know has never been the real Lumine. She's either still in the spaceship, either dead or alive, but she didn't see herself because she went straight to either, or even worse, she's never really existed. She was created in Karya as a copy of the Traveler, a man-made descender basically, and somehow both of them were given fake memories so that her existence would make sense or that the Traveler would be drawn to her. Of course, these are just random thoughts, don't take them too seriously. Next is the ghostly power that picked the right books for us in the Final Night Cemetery. Of course, it looked like a ghost, but Flins wasn't really buying that, and then when the Boon and Blast Kuuvahki cannon was fired, Hissy Island was also mysteriously shielded, and it wasn't Columbina. I'll say right here and right now, I think it was Nicole both times. Talking about Nicole, so an angel, according to the Iderlite Spinderloot, beyond the ruins of the ancient palace, there's a sacred forest of Lake Amsvartnir. Why are they so hard to pronounce? Anyway, beyond which lies the core of the Seelie, which is concealed from mortal eyes, but also where a wolf once broke into. If that wolf was Andreas, the Seelie would be the ancient god that gave him his powers, so it wouldn't be a coincidence that Varka, the king of Boreas, went to Lake Amsvartnir right before we got to Nod-Krai. Did he breach into the core of the Seelie? And why did he meet Rerir near Starsand Shoal? I don't know about you, but I can't wait for version Luna 2 to be released. And that's it, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you're interested in Genshin Impact Theory videos, consider subscribing. My next sublunary video will cover everything we didn't talk about in this one, like Flins for example, who will have already been released and I will have already pulled for, so I'll be able to read his backstory. Well then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, over and out.